Hola amigos, bienvenidos otra vez al programa Latinos en Columbus. Latinos en Columbus está producido por el alguacil Sheriff John Darr. Es una actividad del Comité Hispano del Alguacil. En este programa Latinos en Columbus presentamos temas de interés al pueblo. Por ejemplo, transportación, educación, asuntos legales y otros temas de interés al pueblo. Ya tenemos 3 años y medio filmando, produciendo este programa Latinos en Columbus. Queremos dar gracias a la ciudad de Columbus, CCGTV, también a Columbus State University para facilitar este programa. Yo soy su conductor, Deputy Sheriff Olin Doss. Yo aprendí español ya de adulto con un cuaderno, un diccionario y aprendiendo unas pocas palabras al día. Ustedes pueden hacer lo mismo si quieren aprender otro idioma. En el programa de hoy tenemos como invitado el profesor adjunto de LaGrange College, en LaGrange, Georgia, el doctor profesor John Torres, y queremos darle muchas gracias por haber estado con nosotros hoy. Bienvenidos, doctor Torres. Por favor, platícanos un poco de usted.
English or Spanish?
No, we're just going to do Spanish.
Sí, yo nací en Milwaukee, Wisconsin, pero criado en El Paso, Texas. Fui a la Universidad de San Antonio, Texas. Conseguí mi doctorado en la Universidad Estatal de Florida. Yo trabajaba para un contratista Pentágono y luego se llega a ser un profesor de ciencias políticas de LaGrange en 2001. Mi esposa Isabel es un maestra de LaGrange y mi hija es Valerie, 11 años.
11 años.
Y, en el sexto grado.
Sexto grado, qué bien.
Y mi hijo Zachary Taylor, edad 7 años, está en el segundo grado.
Okay, muy bien, very good. Dr. Torres, can we do this in English as well? Okay, but as you suggested, we'll do it in both. Could you just repeat what you said in English for those viewers that are in English?
That's good.
Thank you. That's a good idea.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I was raised in El Paso, Texas. Went to school in San Antonio, Texas. I got my doctorate in political science from Florida State University, and I worked as a Pentagon contractor before coming to LaGrange College to be a political science professor in 2001. My wife's name is Valerie, my wife's name is Elizabeth, and my daughter's name is Valerie, and she is 11 years old. She's in the 6th grade. My son Zachary is in the 2nd grade. He's 7 years old, and my wife's a teacher in LaGrange Academy.
Very good. Muy bien, muy bien. Profesor Torres, ¿cuántos hispanos viven en Estados Unidos? ¿Y cuántos, qué porcentaje de nuestra población? What is the percentage of our population of Hispanics in the U.S.?
Okay. It is estimated that it's 54 million, and that would make up about 17% of the American population. 64% are originally from Mexico, with about 10% following that as the next largest group, and that's from Puerto Rico. They currently make up about 9.2% of Georgia's population, and in Troup County, where LaGrange is, the Hispanic population is 3.6%. It's a little more rural, a little bit smaller county than Muskogee County here in Columbus.
Muy bien.
In Columbus, the percentage of Hispanics is 6.4%. It's 54 millones o 17% de la población de Estados Unidos.
17%, muchos, sí. Un gran porcentaje.
Sí. 64% son dos orígenes mexicano, con cerca de 10% procedentes de Puerto Rico, que hagan un incremento de 9.2% de la población de LaGrange, de Georgia.
De Georgia, 9.2.
Sí, en el condado de Troup. de donde La Grange, la ciudad, la población hablana de hispana de 3%. En Columbus el número de hispanos es de 6.4%.
6.4. Ok, la mayoría son mexicanos, 64% de los hispanos son hispanos. 64% are Hispanics of the ones in the U.S., correct? Or Mexican?
Or from Mexico.
From Mexico, okay. Muy bien. ¿Qué tan rápido está creciendo esta población aquí en Estados Unidos y en Georgia y en la parte sur de Estados Unidos? Por favor.
That'll be fine. In the United States, both these numbers are expected to double by 2060, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The growth in Georgia is expected to be 300%. 36% of all Hispanics live in the southeast United States, and over the last two census periods, 2000 to 2010, the count of Hispanics is 50% higher than before 2000. The decade before. En los Estados Unidos, ambos números se espera que duplique en el año 2060, según de la Oficina de Censo de los Estados Unidos. En la década de 1990, el crecimiento en Georgia fue de 300%.
300%. Crecimiento. 300% growth. Mucho. It's a lot.
Y 36% de los hispanos viven en el suroeste.
Sureste de Estados Unidos.
Y el crecimiento de 2000 a 2010 fue de 50% más que antes del año 2000.
De 50% más crecimiento en 10 años que antes de 2000. Okay. 50% faster growth. Muy bien. ¿Cuántos votantes hispanos registrados tenemos en Estados Unidos y en Georgia? ¿Y cuántos actualmente votan? How many Hispanic voters do we have registered in the United States and in Georgia, and how many actually vote?
Okay. Well, in the United States, Hispanics made up about 8.4% of the voters. In October of 2012, it said only 111,000 Hispanics were registered to vote, and they made up less than 2% of all Georgia's voters.
Oh, muy poco, very small percentage.
Yes. En los Estados Unidos, los hispanos de solo 8.4% de los votantes. En el mes de octubre de 2012, solo 111,000 what is it? 111,000.
111,000.
111,000. Okay. De los hispanos registrados para votar y menos del 2% de Georgia son votantes.
De 111,000, solo 2% son votantes. Of 111,000, only 2% are registered voters.
Sí.
Muy poco, very few. Qué lástima. Y de los hispanos que son recién llegados, naturalizados, ¿verdad? Con papeles correctos y todo, ellos tienen mucho entusiasmo para votar o tienen miedo o son renecios para votar. o encuentran ellos obstáculos? Do the newly arrived documented immigrants, are they eager to vote, or are they reluctant, or do they face obstacles?
Sin miedo. Tienen miedo. No, most are not eager to vote. They, some of them, not all, but some face language barriers. Sometimes people who came here legally to get involved in politics south of the border is sometimes a dangerous proposition, not always the case in Latin American countries, but certainly, you know, not as much today, but even in the past it was considered a scary proposition. And it's still the case in a few countries in the South, as we were talking about before this, or south of the border. Even for those who want to be registered to vote, some people assume that they are here legally because of the last name or the ethnicity, and or they're afraid that they will become Democratic supporters, and so Republicans are reluctant to consider them for registration. No, la mayoría no están dispuestos a votar.
La mayoría no están puestos.
Algunos enfrentan barreras de idioma, otros incluso los aquí legalmente y están liberales, están en una mala situación políticamente.
Claro.
Para participar política de los países América Latina era una actividad peligrosa en los últimos años y todavía eso se supone que están aquí igualmente o se convertirá en un partido de los demócratas, los republicanos interesante se resistan a votar por ellos.
Okay. It's too bad that people look at people and assume things just by looking at them and with their Hispanic names. That causes people to be reluctant to vote and causes problems politically for Hispanics and for the parties as well. Okay, muy bien. Very good. Are there organizations that strive to help Hispanics register to vote here in Georgia?
There's some organizations that do this, not as many as we think, but it's a growing number. There's a group called GALEO, G-A-L-E-O, Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials. There's also a group called the New Georgia Project, and again, that's New Georgia Project. There's also a group called Georgia Votes, and what Georgia Votes does is it gets together a lot of different groups and brings them together. So it doesn't just focus on Hispanics, it focuses on registering lots of different people. No hay muchas organizaciones que hacen esto. GALEO, Asociación de Funcionarios Latinos Electos de Georgia y Nueva Georgia Proyecto podría. Un grupo que se llama Georgia Votos, que se produjo una alianza de muchos grupos interesados en escribir los hispanos.
Entonces son principalmente dos organizaciones que están ayudando ahorita con registrarlos a votar. Hay un mito que hispanos votan ciegamente por el Partido Demócrata. ¿Eso es el caso o es más complejo que eso? There's a myth that Hispanics only vote for Democrats. Is there anything to that, or is it more complex than that?
That's a very good question. There is a myth that Hispanics will only vote Democratic. I speak to Republican groups, and a lot of people, that is their assumption, and sometimes I have to do what I can to dispel that. They could just as easily vote Republican. In fact, Republicans have been told that because Hispanics are only likely to vote Democrat, they're missing out on a great opportunity. There was this occurred to me, there's a magazine, it's like the National Review, was pretty much saying to Republicans, don't bother trying to register or appeal to Hispanics because they won't vote for you. They're all biased Democrats. at any rate, but smart Republicans have realized that there are many Hispanic candidates. In fact, like Marco Rubio, the Florida senator, Brian Sandoval, who is the Nevada governor, Susana Martinez, she is New Mexico's governor, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, she's a Cuban American, she's a longtime Florida congresswoman. The Diaz-Balart brothers, Mario and Lincoln, in Congress, also from Florida. Ted Cruz, the new senator from Texas, who may run for president in 2016.
Maybe.
And they can be also very conservative. They're not all of them are among the moderates. One or two that I mentioned can be considered moderates, but most are seen as very conservative. Existe el mito de que los hispanos solo vota democrático, que sería tan sencillo como votar por ellos por los republicanos, pero porque los republicanos han dicho que los hispanos son solo probabilidades de convertirse en los democráticas que están desaprovechando la oportunidad de conseguir una gran oportunidad. Los republicanos inteligentes se han dado cuenta de que los hispanos como Marco Rubio, Brian Sandoval, Susana Martinez, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, los hermanos Diaz-Balart en el Congreso y Ted Cruz de Texas puede ser conservador.
¿Y cuáles son los temas en que los hispanos están de acuerdo con el Partido Demócrata? ¿Y en qué temas están de acuerdo los republicanos y hispanos in esta área? What issues do Hispanics agree with the Democratic Party, and what issues do the Republicans and Hispanics agree on?
Okay. Obviously, Hispanics like the message of economic opportunity that Republicans often talk about. Many are very socially conservative, often having views that are actually more conservative on issues like abortion and gay marriage than even whites have, if you take a look at all whites, not just conservative whites. But laws like the ones in Arizona and Kansas that have been passed recently, requiring Hispanics to prove citizenship for any reason, but not to have other people. I mean, nobody looks at you and say, you look like you're from the Czech Republic, etc. You have to produce some ID or something like that. Nobody does the same. It seems like people are singled out for how they look. Even as officials say, there is no racial profiling. And this is very much an insult. It makes Hispanics very concerned about the Republican Party and what their goals are. Some people in the Southwest, living in places like California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, some of them can trace their roots back further than the arrival of whites.
Exactly.
To a long period of time. Some of them even to the Indian population before the Spaniards. And have to prove why you belong in an area is considered very insulting.
That's right.
And
I lived in New Mexico a while. I understand that completely. And the Hispanics in New Mexico basically run the state. They get along well with the non-Hispanics, but yes, they're very confident in their rights and their abilities to do the things, and they know their history. They know where they came from.
And some of these attempts, like the states of Arizona and Kansas, to keep Hispanics from registering to vote, are only hurting the Republican Party. Los hispanos les gusta el mensaje de las oportunidades económicas que los republicanos apoyan. Muchos de ellos son socialmente conservadores, promoviendo con opiniones más conservadoras con respecto a las cuestiones de aborto y matrimonio gay que los blancos. Sin embargo, leyes con las de Arizona y Kansas que requieren los hispanos para probar su nacionalidad por cualquier motivo, cuando la misma norma no se aplica a los demás, han de hacer los hispanos muy preocupados por el Partido Republicano.
Claro.
Sí.
Of course.
En el suroeste, in the southwest, hay ancestros que viven en California, Arizona, Nuevo México y Texas, mucho más antes de la llegada.
Muchos antes de la llegada de
los blancos.
De los blancos, sí.
Son particularmente amargos sobre y los intentos de prohibir a los hispanos a registrarse para votar no están ayudando.
Quiero hacer un comentario. I want to comment on what you just said. It's very understandable that they would feel that way just because of the way they look or because of the language that they speak. And I personally believe that we all, when we see that happening, have an obligation to say something to wherever it's going on. Just to make a comment, to explain to whoever's thinking that way, talking that way, that you got to look at the other side of this. You can't judge people on what they look like or what they sound like. And you certainly can't make it harder for them to vote just because you suspect that they might be illegal. Todos tenemos una obligación de, cuando vemos eso, de enfrentarlo y decir lo que tenemos que decir, lo que debemos de decir, porque las personas que están portando así saben que no deben de portar así. Todos tenemos esa obligación. Bueno, esa es mi opinión. Thank you. That's my opinion.
Buena opinión.
Y la fuerza política de los hispanos en las elecciones es una fuerza grande. Is the political force of the Hispanics in elections, is it a big force or not?
In certain states they have a bigger influence. Some states more than others. But not as much now as it could be. But in close elections, especially if we're looking even in Georgia, both elections are supposed to be very close for governor and senator. Even a couple local races, you can see just within a few percentage points. But as the Hispanic population not only grows, but the number of people who register, it will be a much bigger influence, especially as they get registered. And there was a scholar who was at Southern Methodist University. When he gave a talk at a conference, he said if Hispanics registered at the same rate as African Americans, their power would be immense. And he was not criticizing African Americans. He was saying that African Americans have done more recently a good job of getting people registered, and Hispanics need to emulate what African Americans are doing.
Understand that the Republican Party recognizes that there are thousands of Hispanic young men and women turning 18 each month.
Yes.
Literally thousands. And so I think they recognize that they need to appreciate the concerns of the Hispanics.
Oh, yes.
And they would love to have their votes. So what you just said is very true.
That Hispanic Republican candidates are good vote getters. And en algunos estados tiene mayor influencia, en otros estados no tanto ahora, pero las elecciones pueden hacer una gran diferencia. El poder elector se incrementaría a medida que más se registran, si se inscriben en la misma proporción que los afroamericanos estarían muy potentes.
Si fueran a registrar al mismo porcentaje que los afroamericanos, serán muy potentes los hispanos en las elecciones. If they were to vote as the same percentage, or register to vote at the same percentage as African Americans, then the Hispanics would be a potent force in the electorate.
I mean, like for example, the Democratic Party always used to get his African American votes, like a similar proportion, but numerically not as many were registered. People would look at the proportion that voted Democratic and say, there's not much we need to do. And after all, people are realizing we're losing a lot of close races because not a lot of African Americans are registered. So this is something that's been going on. People haven't realized that for Hispanics yet.
Very true. Muy Correct. Would having a Hispanic person on the ticket, the national presidential race ticket, make a difference? Si tuviéramos una persona hispano corriendo para vicepresidente, ¿verdad? ¿Eso hará una diferencia en su opinión?
Somewhat. Putting Marco Rubio on the ticket, I actually researched this very issue in 2012. It would not have won the 2012 election for Mitt Romney, according to the polls. It would not have even won the Hispanic vote, which surprised me a little bit.
Really?
You know, just in putting him, not just would he win the overall election, but the Hispanic vote. It's because Mitt Romney supported laws like the one in Arizona and like the one in Kansas. He even put the person who wrote those laws on his staff. And that was considered, you know, we mentioned earlier about pride and, you know, just what those laws mean
it's
to
an
Hispanic
insult.
people.
Sure.
The insult. I think that was too much to overcome. If you had someone like Rick Perry or Newt Gingrich, who were more open to the Hispanic population, who talked about the need to bring Hispanics in, if they had put someone like Marco Rubio, that would be a big difference. Mitt Romney also made other blunders, other mistakes. His wife claimed that Hispanics need to look past their biases, and that's not what you tell someone. You know, you say, well, you're biased, but try not to be biased. That's not a compliment.
No, it's not.
I don't know why she said that. But, you know, obviously she's not running for the office herself, but it's something that people focused on. And especially when she spoke to a Hispanic audience on a Hispanic television station while saying that.
Really?
It's possible a Hispanic candidate could matter, but it depends on the policies. Un poco poner Marco Rubio en el billete, the ballot, como vicepresidente, no hubiera ganado las elecciones de 2012.
No hubiera ganado. No.
Según las encuestas, porque Romney apoyaba las leyes de Arizona y Kansas, llega a poner al autor de las esas leyes.
El que escribió las leyes fue a trabajar con Romney.
Por Romney campaign.
Sí,
de Romney. De leyes es en su personal. Hizo varios otros errores garrafales en la elección, como su esposa alegando que los hispanos deben mirar más allá de sus prejuicios.
Más allá.
Es un posible un candidato hispano podría, pero depende de las políticas.
Posiblemente puede ser una diferencia, pero depende en la política. Possibly could make a difference, but it depends on the political situation.
Rick Perry y Newt Gingrich, posible.
Posible. Okay. ¿Usted cree que saben agradecer a la cultura hispana, las personas aquí en Georgia y en la parte sureste de Estados Unidos? Do you think there's an appreciation for Hispanic culture in Georgia and in the southeast U.S.?
Well, there's not as much focus on the Hispanic culture per se, but that is changing. You know, people usually bring up Cinco de Mayo. It is well celebrated. I mean, that's a big deal for people in the southeast. There's an interest in the soccer, and there's plenty of Mexican restaurants. There are several thriving in LaGrange. They do well. But of course, there's more to the Hispanic culture than just holidays and sports and food, but it's a start. The kids are learning a lot about the culture in the Spanish classes, as my kids are finding out. They've been at public school and private school, and there's a lot to talk about the Hispanic culture. It's a start. No hay mucho enfoque hispana en el sur de por sí, pero eso está cambiado. 5 de Mayo es el celebrador. El interés del fútbol, no fútbol americano, de soccer, es así. Hay un montón de restaurantes mexicanos y los 3 lo hacen muy bien. Por supuesto que hay más a la cultura hispana, días festivas, deporte, la comida, pero es un comienzo, es un start. Los niños están aprendiendo tanto acerca de la cultura como la lengua en las clases de español.
De acuerdo. I'd like to comment on that, what you just said. When I travel in the U.S., I've noticed in the last 10 years, when I would drive from here to El Paso, Texas, let's say, almost every town I go through, a population of 5,000 or more, you see a lot of Hispanic restaurants, Hispanic stores. You see a lot of Hispanics everywhere. They are no longer just a part of the large U.S. American cities as they were years and years ago. They're everywhere in our culture now, and I think it makes our culture stronger to have the mixing of the two cultures.
There was a dispute in California where somebody was trying to protest the Cinco de Mayo festival by hanging out an American flag, and all it did was show ignorance, because the United States helped Mexico win the Battle of Puebla and help arm the resistance against Emperor Maximiliano.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also ignorance of the local people, the local school board, to ban the American flag, from such ceremonies, because if someone studied the history, they should be together, because that's what it was. It was a group effort.
I want to comment in Spanish on what I just said in English. Yo he notado cuando manejo por la parte sur de Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, entre Atlanta y El Paso, Texas, en los últimos 10 años, cada pueblo de 5,000 personas o más tienen una población hispana. Hay muchos restaurantes mexicanos, muchas tiendas hispanos, y en mi opinión, la cultura de nosotros aquí en Estados Unidos es más fuerte por tener esas culturas mezcladas. Y ya está en cada pueblo. It's in almost every town now. Do you think a significant percentage of our population in Georgia appreciate the work that Hispanics are doing here in the U.S., or do they continue to view them as taking jobs away from the local populace? Is that attitude changing? ¿Usted cree que un porcentaje significante de Estados Unidos reconoce el trabajo que están haciendo los hispanos, lo bueno que están haciendo los hispanos en los trabajos? ¿O piensa usted que todavía hay bastantes americanos que tienen resentimiento y piensa que están quitando trabajos para ellos? ¿Y esa actitud está cambiando? Is that attitude changing?
See, I think that was what people originally thought. That was the original fear. Loss of jobs. Now people are realizing that Hispanics aren't always taking jobs away from those who are concerned. In a lot of ways, they're actually adding jobs, especially in agriculture. The work is provided to meet the international demand. For example, suddenly China is interested in a lot of crops that Georgia is growing, and if the farms want to be productive and make a profit, to meet the world demand for Georgia crops, you need not just someone who's willing to work for low wages, but someone who's experienced as well.
And that's very important for Georgia's economic economy, the exports, right. Very important.
And it's not limited to agriculture either. This includes service professionals who are filling spots in rural Georgia that are places that maybe not a lot of people want to go to, a small rural Georgia town, whereas some people who are Hispanic, that's not as much a problem. We're talking about lawyers, doctors, teachers, people owning businesses like you were talking about. Yo creo que eso era el miedo inicial, la pérdida de los puestos de trabajo, pero la gente ya están dando cuenta de que los hispanos no están tomando los trabajos de los interesados. En realidad son adición de trabajos especialmente en agricultura, ya que la obra es satisface la creciente demanda mundial de Georgia productos agricultores. Eso ni siquiera está incluyendo son los profesionales de servicio que están llegando a lugares en las zonas de rural. Would you say countryside?
Yeah.
Like
Small rural towns and countryside.
Los ciudades
Ciudades pequeñas, pequeñas,
pequeñas
disculpe.
de Georgia muchas veces no reconocidos porque los son hispanos, abogados, doctores, maestros, propietarios de la empresa.
Pues, claro, hay profesionales trabajando en los pueblos pequeños de Georgia, bueno, en toda Georgia, pero especialmente ayudan mucho a los hispanos profesionales a los pueblos pequeños en Georgia. Y la mayoría, una gran parte de los blancos no reconocen eso, que están ayudando no solo en los trabajos de agricultura, construcción, pero también están ayudando en las áreas profesionales. A lot of Americans don't recognize that not only do Hispanics contribute, to the agricultural industry and construction, but also in the professional areas in these smaller towns in Georgia. You're right. That's not really widely recognized. ¿Cómo son diferentes los hispanos del área suroeste que aquí en el sureste políticamente? How are the Hispanics different here in the southeast versus the southwest? How are they different?
Yeah. In the Southwest, Hispanics feel much bolder. They're more comfortable in their settings. They're more willing to get involved politically, especially those who've been there, lived in the area a longer time. Because of those with the older connections are the more confident ones. Hispanics in the Southeast, more often than not, or usually, they tend to be newcomers, not just to the country, but to the area. Even if they lived in another area for a long time, they might be moving to the Southeast for the first time. They're a little more timid about participating in the politics and speaking out. En el sureste, los hispanos sienten más ayudas, se sienten más cómodos en su configuración y más dispuestas a participar políticamente. La mayor son las viejas en la zona, los hispanos en el sureste. Son los recién llegados, no solo en el país, pero la zona. La zona.
Claro.
Son más tímidos a la hora de participar en la política y hablar de políticas.
Más tímidos de hablar de asuntos políticos.
Sí.
Y una parte de eso está debido a de donde vinieron, de sus países. Part of that is go back to where they came from and what they were used to politically in their country. Yo entiendo que en muchos países hay mucho resentimiento contra los políticos y ellos fueron maltratados a veces con los gobiernos de sus países. I think some were mistreated when they attempted to participate politically in their countries and therefore in their countries, original countries, and reluctant to participate here to a certain degree. Yeah. Okay. You and I have something in common. You're from El Paso, Texas, or went to school in El Paso, lived there. I had three times I lived in El Paso. I was assigned to Fort Bliss 2 times. I found that El Paso was a very interesting city. Culturally, I thought the Hispanic culture and the American white culture got along very well. Those two cultures mixed. They celebrated holidays, from Mexican holidays, Mexican-American cultural events, and American holidays, and all were celebrated together. And it was almost like a unique culture that drew upon the strengths of both of the cultures, and the family strengths of the Hispanic culture was very visible and very important in El Paso. I enjoyed my time there, and I admired that El Paso, in spite of being on the border with Mexico and the drug cartels were just across the border, El Paso is considered one of the safest cities in the U.S. And I think a good part of that's due to the the El Paso law enforcement. Another part of it is just the people themselves. That's my opinion. Do you want to comment on when you lived in El Paso?
Sure. It sounds like a very good, accurate picture of the border. It used to be much closer together. I mean, the people of both sides were closer together.
And Juarez and El Paso.
Yeah, we even had a lot of students who would come over from Mexico to the private school that I attended to go to classes there. There's now more of a wall, unfortunately, because of the security between the two cultures and because of immigration as well. But there's still that close connection that you talked about. Eso suena como una muy buena de la frontera, pero antes eran más unidos hasta que hubo un más fuerte construido entre las dos culturas debido a la seguridad y la inmigración, pero aún existe.
Permíteme decirlo en español, lo que yo le pregunté, lo que yo comenté en inglés, que yo y él hemos vivido en El Paso, Texas. Él estuvo en la escuela, en high school en El Paso, Texas. Y yo 2 veces estuve en Fort Bliss con el ejército. Y yo noté que en El Paso, Texas, las dos culturas, la cultura hispana y la cultura americana, se mezclan muy bien. Celebran los días festivos americanos y mexicanos, y bueno, es casi como una cultura único en cierta forma. Saben aprovechar de las cosas fuertes de cada cultura, y también especialmente de la cultura hispana familiar. Me gustó mucho El Paso, Texas, es una de mis ciudades favoritas. Y otra cosa, El Paso, Texas, a pesar de que estar en la frontera, aquí México, el cartel de drogas y todo, El Paso está considerado una de las ciudades más seguras de Estados Unidos. Eso, en mi opinión, es debido a la policía del Paso y también a la gente del Paso. Me gustó mucho vivir en El Paso, Texas. Quisiera que otras ciudades de nosotros tuvieran esa misma mezcla de cultura. Quizás estamos llegando a eso. Okay, is there anything else?
Yeah. It's also a good assessment. I always felt very safe in El Paso, and there was a lot of professionalism in the law enforcement community. The mayor was Jonathan Rogers, and the sheriff was Leo Samaniego, and they had a good working relationship. Like you said, the professionalism. My brother and his family, they are a Hispanic family. They also have similar views on the situation. I go out to see them. That they also believe that La Ciudad Juarez is not as safe as it used to be. when I lived in El Paso.
It
was no big deal to go over to the border. In fact, it was like going to Alabama.
Right, yeah. Go over to have fun.
Exactly.
At the time, a lot of high school kids would go over and have fun.
Unfortunately, all the time. And I wonder if my parents are listening right now, because some of the times they knew about it and sometimes they didn't. Not sure how well that translates.
But that's changed because of the drug cartel activity.
That is correct. People in El Paso don't go to La Ciudad Juarez as often. It was terrible to read this week about the students who were killed, most likely for police working for drug gangs, because students were protesting activities.
That was in Mexico.
That was a massacre.
But that was in southern Mexico, though. It was not anywhere near the border. It was an agricultural area, I understand, and small college that had maybe had some leftist leanings and what have you. But
most likely.
But so anyway, it's a very sad situation.
It is, and that's the antithesis of professionalism.
El doctor está comentando de que triste lo que acaba de pasar en México, que en la parte sur de México unos 54 estudiantes parece que fueron matados por la policía. Una cosa triste, pero gracias a Dios no tenemos tanto de eso aquí.
Not in El Paso. There was great professionalism by the law enforcement, and that's very important. And that's why people go to El Paso, and and it's also, all of this violence is one reason why people are coming here. One reason is for economic opportunity. Another reason is because, the way that the political parties, not all political parties, especially the current party, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the PRI,
the
Partido Revolucionario Internacional,
Institucional.
For most people, it's a very corrupt party, and they try to run the government with whatever they want in mind. And under them, the drug culture thrived. Under the Panistas, the National Action Party, Partido Acción Nacional, there was more an effort to combat the cartels, los drogos, but not anymore. It's back to the way it used to be, and that's why a lot of people want to come here. Eso también es una buena evaluación para earlier. Siempre más sentí segura en El Paso. Hay una gran dosis en profesionalidad. Mi hermano y su familia, una familia hispana, tienen vistas similares de la situación, pero no es tan seguro como
era antes.
Cuando yo vive en El Paso, Texas. Las personas en la ciudad de El Paso ya no van mucho a la ciudad Juárez.
No, es cierto.
Yes.
Poco peligroso, ya la gente no va. Bueno, Dr. Torres, gracias por haber estado con nosotros en el programa de Latinos in Columbus. Thank you, Dr. Torres, for being with us on the program Latinos in Columbus. We really appreciate and enjoyed the interview, and I'm sure it will be helpful. Estoy seguro que esta entrevista va a dar mucha información que va a ayudar a las personas a entender la cultura hispana y lo que está pasando políticamente. I think this is going to help people understand politically what's going on with Hispanics in our country. And thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Bueno, amigos, gracias por haber estado con nosotros otra vez en el programa Latinos in Columbus. Antes de irnos, les quiero mencionar algunas cosas para evitar problemas. Si manejan, si toman alcohol, no manejan. Hablan a un amigo para manejar, un carro de sitio, un taxi, usa el autobús metro. Si están manejando tomado, les van a llevar a la cárcel, va a costar mucho dinero, puede causar problemas con su documentación de inmigración y peor, se puede chocar y matar a alguien. Otra cosa, aquí en Alabama y Georgia y en todos los países, los estados del país en realidad, no puede manejar con licencia internacional si vive aquí. Tiene que tener licencia local donde usted vive. Otra vez los van a llevar a la cárcel, va a costar mucho dinero. No tienen miedo de reportar crimen. Si ustedes ven algo que no está bien, sospechan algo, deben de reportarlo. No vamos a pedir papeles de prueba de residencia, de inmigración, nada de eso. Es responsabilidad de todos nosotros reportar crimen para tener nuestra ciudad, nuestra comunidad más seguro. Si usted ve algo que quiere reportar, que debe de reportar, puede llamar a 911, 911, ¿verdad? O puede llamar a la policía a 706-563-3232. 706-563-3232 o simplemente marque 911. Bueno, amigos, nos vemos en otra ocasión en el programa Latinos en Columbus. Hasta luego. Okay, thank you.